Hi, and welcome back to Shelley Reads Stuff. I'm Shelley, and I'm not in my usual space. I'm back at my in law's house so that my daughter can finish up her science experiment that has to do with hummingbirds because they have 1,000 hummingbirds here at my in law's house. So I'm recording from there. I finally got the computer back from my kids so that I could do a recording since they've had it for online schooling, which I guess that's more important than my book videos. But in my world, books trump everything. So today I want to do an August in review, but I don't want to talk about every single book that I read. I just want to do a top 5, and this hopefully will be a new segment on my channel coming to you on Wednesdays, the top 5 lists. So this is the top 5 books that I read in August. So before we get to my top 5 August reads, some statistics. I read 16 books in August, and you might be thinking, oh my gosh, 16 books, that's a ton. But it didn't quite break down like you might think, so it wasn't 16 books. This was my breakdown. I read 4 nonfiction or memoir, and that includes audiobooks, because most of my nonfiction is I listen to on audio. I read 4 historical fiction. I read 7 graphic novels and 1 thriller. And you might be thinking, oh my gosh, 7 graphic novels, that's a ton. Well, I've mentioned this before, but I'm part of a challenge group in real life, and our theme for August was read graphic novels. That's why I read so many graphic novels. So our theme for September is banned books for Banned Book Week, which happens at the end of September. So I'm still kind of researching what banned books I want to read. But instead of talking about all 16 books, and after about 3 or 4, you guys are just like, oh my gosh, she's still talking and still talking and still talking. Ugh. And I don't want to still talk and still talk and still talk that whole time. So I'm just going to do my top 5. Of the 7 graphic novels that I read, my favorite one was El Deafo by C.C. Bell. And this is it's an autobiography or a memoir. I guess it's more of a memoir than an autobiography. But the author, she contracted meningitis when she was 4 years old, and that left her hearing impaired and deaf. She lost most of her hearing. So the story goes from when she loses her hearing when she's 4, all the way through, I think it's 7th grade, and how she makes friends, what her school experience is like how people treat her, how people think that they're treating her with respect and helping, but some of the actions they do aren't really helping at all. And it was just great because it was another perspective, one that I don't personally have. So it was great hearing what she thought was helpful from other people who were talking to her as a hearing impaired person, and what things weren't. Like yelling at her, not helpful. She said she just hears it as rah, 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 just louder. So that was interesting. And the drawings were really good. She draws herself and the other people in the book as animals, not as humans. So she's a rabbit, and she's got these ears, and her hearing aids have to go on her ears up here. And El Deafo is her alter ego that does all the things that she wants to say and do. But El Deafo kind of helps to teach her to stand up for herself. So that was the best graphic novel out of the 7 that I read this year, and that's El Deafo by C.C. Bell. So I read a lot of really good nonfiction this month, and I am very into science nonfiction, that teaches me about the history of science in a storytelling kind of way. So think like Eric Larson, Isaac Storm, or The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks, things like that. That is my wheelhouse. So some science, but also some really good storytelling and a human element. So I listened to The Great Quake How the Biggest Earthquake in North America Changed Our Understanding of the Planet by Henry Fountain. Now, I'm here for a really good disaster story, so I loved reading this. First of all, I loved reading it because it's about earthquakes and geology, which I'm very interested in. I sound like a total and complete nerd right now. I love reading books about geology. Oh my gosh. So, uh, but it has this great human element. So it tells the story of the people who were living in Alaska in the 1960s who experienced this quake, both First Nation people and also white people that had settled there, and how like the Alaska spirit helps them overcome this huge natural disaster. It's estimated Richter scale was very much in its infancy in the 1960s, and so it estimated that it was like a 9.2 or to 9.4 on the Richter scale. That follows specific communities throughout the quake and how they deal with during the quake and after the aftermath of the quake. And it also follows a scientist as he's doing research, field research, and happens on evidence of plate tectonics, which was in its complete infancy at the time. Plate tectonics was not a widely accepted theory. And so, but this quake really solidified our understanding of plate tectonics. So, and bonus, because photography was a thing in the 1960s, you can go and Google pictures of what Anchorage looked like after the earthquake and what Valdez looked like after the earthquake and just different things. And I am all about looking at photographs and things any way that I can get extra information or extra research. I'm here for that. So that was The Great Quake by Henry Fountain. So another nonfiction that I listened to that I absolutely loved and gave 5 stars to was Becoming by Michelle Obama. And I feel like I'm a little late to the party with this book. I wasn't really sure that I wanted to read it. I used to be very involved and follow politics religiously, and then it kind of like took over my life in my 20s, and I just decided ain't nobody got time for that. So I kind of like stopped seriously following politics and things like that. So I wasn't really sure that I wanted to read a political memoir, but this is not. And I didn't read it. I again listened to the audiobook, and Michelle Obama, she reads it in her fabulous soothing voice. And I just loved hearing her story about how she was just from a regular Joe family from the south side of Chicago, and she grew up, and her mom and dad, and they lived in this apartment, and she has an older brother, and how through education and hard work and perseverance, she became the first lady. Well, she became the first lady of the United States, but she became this very successful lawyer, a very successful nonprofit. She worked for large hospitals, things like that before becoming the first lady. And just her humble way that she tells her amazing story, and how she's just so gracious and thankful and, pinching herself all the time of like, I cannot believe that we're here, that we're in the White House, and oh my gosh, what are we going to do with this immense power comes great, with great power comes great responsibility kind of thing. And I wouldn't say that I'm like an all-in like Obama fan, so, and I'm not going to talk politics here, but I don't really fall into either major party, so it's not like I'm like a all-in Obama or all-in Democrat kind of thing. And I still really enjoyed this book. I felt like she kept some towards the end, she gets kind of political, but I feel like she talked mostly about her experience and not necessarily about the politics and that kind of thing. I mean, you can't be a first lady and write a memoir and not talk about some politics. I mean, come on, like her husband is the president and ran for office multiple times and things like that. So yes, there's politics, but I didn't feel like it was the overriding factor in the whole book. So if you haven't read this one yet, I really loved the audio version, just because hearing her tell her own story was awesome. So I would highly recommend Becoming by Michelle Obama. So as I've been really paying attention to my reading life since I started this booktube channel last month, I guess 6 weeks ago, I noticed I read a heck of a lot of historical fiction. Now, I knew that I read a lot of historical fiction, but I didn't realize how much historical fiction I read. If you had asked me before, I would have said, oh, I read mostly thrillers and mysteries with some historical fiction thrown in. So when I find a book that is a historical fiction mystery thriller kind of thing with that kind of like mixing of genres, oh my gosh, yes. So I read The Poison Thread by Laura Purcell this month, and it's a short little book. I say short little book. It's less than 300 pages, which I consider a short book. And it was awesome. So it was it's one that I discovered when I was doing the Reading Rush Challenge at the end of July. I went through, they had a thread on their website for people that were participating for your 5-star reads. And somebody had said The Corset by Laura Purcell was a 5-star read for her. And I couldn't find The Corset anywhere. And I finally did some research and found out that they changed the name of the book. So it was originally The Corset, but then they changed it to The Poisoned Thread. So I read The Poisoned Thread. It takes place in 1840s in England. You have 2 different voices. One is a society girl, and then the other one is in prison for killing her mistress. So she was worked as a seamstress, and she killed her mistress. Or so that's what they're claiming. But nothing is how it seems. So you're like, did Rose really kill her? I don't know. And it flips back and forth between the 2 perspectives. So Dorothea is our socialite, and she is doing good works by going and visiting people in the prison. And she is fascinated by phrenology, which is where you feel the bumps on your head and you are able to tell like what kind of person they are. So she goes to feel Rose, who's the killer, feels her bumps, but she's just perplexed by like why she doesn't have certain bumps that she should have if she's this like killer or this like serial killer, because she keeps saying she killed all these different people. And then we get Rose's story where she tells her story from her childhood on, and her mother was a seamstress, and then she was also trained her, and she kind of has this magical ability that if she's thinking of something as she's stitching, then the person that wears those clothes has that feeling. So she stitched these gloves for a bride, and she was very sad, and the bride couldn't stop crying when she wore the gloves, and it just goes from there. And so she feels like she has these magical powers and these magical abilities. So she tries not to sew because she doesn't want people to be hurt by her sewing, and it goes from there. And like I said, nothing is how it seems. Rose's story isn't necessarily the story that you think it's going to be. Dorothea's not necessarily the perfect society lady. She's got some other stuff going on, and then the ending was awesome. So I can not recommend that enough. So it's either The Poisoned Thread or The Corset, but most places have it as The Poisoned Thread now. And the last one in my top 5 is The Book of Longings by Sue Monk Kidd. I promised you guys I was going to read this, and I did. Now, I'm going to do a 1-minute book review on this to be posted on Sunday. So I'm not going to talk a whole lot about it right now, but it is Sue Monk Kidd, who's The Secret Life of Bees, The Invention of Wings, The Mermaid Chair. So she's becoming this prolific writer, and I've read all of her other books that she's written. In fact, The Invention of Wings is one of my top books for 2020. This one I was curious to read because it has it's about Jesus's wife. What if Jesus had a wife? which some scholars think that he probably did because he was a 30-year-old Jewish man, and most men in that society got married. Like, that's what they did. So it wouldn't seem out of the ordinary for Jesus to get married. Now, Jesus is kind of like a little side character, not a little side character, but he's not the main character. Anna's the main character, his wife. And it was a great look into what the roles of women in biblical times. And I really enjoyed it, but you'll have to come back on Sunday to hear me talk a little bit about some theological things that I had some problems with, or just some plot stuff that I had some issues with. But overall, I really liked it. And Sue Monk Kidd is an amazing storyteller, and I will pretty much read anything that she puts out because I just love her strong women, strong storytelling, different perspectives of history that she gives in her books. And those things are like top of my list, super important. Of Longings by Sue Monk Kidd, and to hear me talk more just specifically about that book, come back on Sunday for my 1-minute review. So the other 11 books that I read this month, I'm just going to fly through them, and if you want to know what I thought about them, I star review and give like a 2 to 3 sentence review on my Goodreads accounts, which is down in my in the description, so you can come and check out my Goodreads. Also, let me know, what books did you read this month? This is a really good reading month for me, so I would love to know what you read that was amazing during August. So leave that in the comments. So here's what else I read this month. Strike Me Down by Mindy Mejia. The Witch Boys series, I read book 2 and 3. I read the first book in July, so I read The Hidden Witch and Midwinter Witch, which is by Molly Ostertag. I listened to Playing to the Gods, which was about like turn of the century theater. Hey Kiddo, another graphic novel by Jarrett J. Karatska, which was another memoir. Sisters by Regina Telgemeier, because you can't read graphic novel month without reading something by her. Golden Hour by Beatrice Williams. Bingo Love by T. Franklin. The Four Tendencies by Gretchen Rubin. Heartstopper by Alice Osman. And I just finished yesterday, so I'm going to count this as an August read, 100 Suns by Karen Tanabe. So I will see you guys on Sunday for my 1-minute review, and next Wednesday I'll be back with another top 5.